arc of change and influencing change and who made them who they are. And so they're really, they're much more sort of historical portraits than landscapes is how I like to describe it. Everything we look at today in these slides, you'll have access to. You're welcome to any images, words, language. Please use this. Everything that I will show you on the website later is free and accessible. Though the family and the production company have been around for decades, the foundation's very new. We're only about 2 years old. It is still a tremendous honor and privilege and challenge to be getting the word out. And I'm really grateful that all of you are here. I hope that we can keep this a little, make this a little bit interactive. I do have clips and images and all of that. And I really welcome and will invite your reactions, your thoughts. So thank you in advance if you're willing to participate. The chat is always there if that's more comfortable. But hopefully there'll be a little bit of hand raising as well. So I've structured our time around 2 particular projects of the Kunhardts. King in the Wilderness came out in 2018, and True Justice about Bryan Stevenson came out in 2019. And as we get into each one, we'll certainly talk more about a little bit of what brought the Kunhardts to these projects, what makes them unique. And we're going to start with King. And I'd like to ask you to read something. We're going to go to the next slide in a minute. And it's called it's a director's statement. And the slide contains the words of Peter Kunhardt, who directed the film, and puts the film in a bit of historical context of what drove them to make this film. And I'll let that speak. The only thing I'll add before we read it is they were really interested in telling a King story that hadn't been told before, and they weren't sure that was possible. So I'd like to ask you to take a minute to read this. I recognize it's a little bit small. I hope you're able to read it with, you may need to minimize the thumbnails of one another, but just take a couple minutes to read it. So this is, again, a director's statement is about sort of why. This is the why of the film. And I hope you guys maybe know where the thumbs up icon is. Maybe you can give me a thumbs up when you've finished reading.
So it's right under the reactions tab, right on the bottom of your screen.
Thanks, Greg. And as you're finishing reading it, or if you finished reading it, if you might also take a moment to think, and I'll ask for a couple people to share, what might be different, what might be the same if Peter was writing this today, if this film was being made now? What might be the same, what might be different? And any general comments you have on it is certainly welcome as well.
Emily, is it okay if I just talk as opposed to typing? Okay.
Oh yes, no, I would prefer people talk, sorry.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
I'm gonna ask, thank you for that clarifying. I would prefer you keep a thought in your head, jot a note, and be ready to share with the group in a minute.
Okay.
And, yeah, hopefully let's do the thumbs up again if you feel like you've read and reflected for a moment. Okay, I don't want to rush you. Just try to wrap up a thought if you can. Would anybody be willing to share? Was it you, Jenny, before who, or?
No, it was Jessica, but I'll jump in.
You looked like you were.
Yeah, I'll jump in. The last paragraph really resonates with me because we sort of have this myth of Dr. King of how he was the nonviolent advocator, and that we kind of have this myth that he was never struck with indecision. He was never struck with fear or worry, and that he only took on the segregationists in the South. You know, we don't spend a lot of time or hear a lot about his work in the anti-war movement or in the work in the housing projects in the North. So I really love that dichotomy of the myth versus the real man. And then the story that goes beyond those initial headlines of the marches in Selma and sorry, I'm losing my words.
That's okay.
The trial and error of bringing the civil rights movement. It almost is as if as the legislation was signed, the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Acts were signed, that done deal, everything's good, let's move on. But we all know that that's not the end of the story. And this kind of gives us that taste of what's next or what he did next.
Thank you, Jenny. So well said, all of it. Thank you. One more. She covered a lot there. So yes, Jessica.
Ooh, pardon me. I'll just follow up with Jenny. I agree with what she said. And I just thought about your initial question of like, would it be different if they made it today? You know, I'm sure it may be a little bit different as they consider the current context, but a lot of what is really being brought into full view right now certainly was occurring when they first decided to make this film and were hatching it. And I've seen most of the film, and
Great.
it has such a mood to it. I mean, I highly recommend it. It was really powerful, and it has such a mood of like restiveness and dissatisfaction and just like, you know, I guess weariness, but also still kind of moving forward. And I think that it kind of highlights, again, when we teach the civil rights movement to students, how to not like tie it up with that neat little bow and be like, oh, there we go, all good. You know, Voting Rights Act, Civil Rights Act, done. Everyone got what they wanted, you know, because it sort of then shows how he continued to sort of push into and highlight all the various ways in which systemic racism operates and how he continued to push to fight for that, but then just as a human being and as a complicated human and person, that just affected him and all those around him within the movement. It was a powerful film.
Thank you, Jessica. I think, again, all of that's so well said. And I'll add on that the film, in the fact that it does expose him as a much more human, flawed. I mean, it's one of the few things you'll find that actually is willing to address some of his infidelity. Like, this is not a perfect man, and this is not a man who did this because it was easy, and he struggled. And I think all of that's important too, to remember in our leaders, that it is difficult, and these are not, you know, people beyond reproach nor beyond, you know, sort of emulation. Like, we can't, you know, we need to sort of accept that it will be a fight, that it will be a struggle, this work. And I think it's especially interesting and imperative, you know, we're all coming from a New York State, you know, northern, you know, instructional sort of perspective. And yes, to exactly as Jessica said, we would love for this story to be linear. We would like it to go from worse to better. We would prefer it if it were a Southern issue. We would prefer it if it was something that was in the past. And a huge amount of the text that have been developed don't reflect that story. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us, if we're going to get anywhere close to understanding where we are in this moment, to understand where we've been. And I don't think anybody who has experienced this summer should be surprised. And if we are surprised, it's because we don't know our history and we don't know what the summer of 1967 was like. And we will get to that a little bit more. So those are going to be those are sort of, I think, some of the calls to action of this film as teachers and as people trying to understand this moment. And I believe that, you know, unfortunately, we're not much farther at all than we were a couple of years ago. And this film, you know, continues to have an incredibly important role in the conversation. So we're going to watch, I want to make sure it's my next, let's see. I'm going to watch the first 5 minutes. Give me 1 second here. If I can get there. I'm sorry, give me 1 second here. Okay. So we're gonna watch the opening 5 minutes. And I in a classroom with students, never, ever, ever let them watch a clip just once. So I'm going to model very poorly. I'm going to ask a lot of you on one viewing. In the interest of time, there's so much I do want to share to give you a sense of some of the KFF resources. So we're going to watch the first 5 minutes once. I generally like, on a first viewing for students to just, there's a tremendous amount to take in visual media, what you're hearing, what you're seeing, the content, the story, just paying attention to the story. And on the second time, the third time, the fourth time, it's nice to give them something very specific to look for, to listen for. In this 5 minutes, in this opening, I want us to just pay, it's going to set up, good documentary film also has a lot in common with the 5-paragraph essay, and it's going to lay out a thesis. This is the introductory paragraph, and it's going to lay out both the thesis of the film. It's going to tell you what the visual style of this story is going to be. And it's going to introduce some of our storytellers. And so, all I really ask is just, again, it's just your first time. So just take it in, pay attention to what you're seeing, hearing, and feeling.
If not within 20.
Sorry, that isn't, let's go back. That's just not the right part.
I came over in the morning to pick Martin up, to drive him to the airport to go to Memphis. The children saw him going to the airport all the time. But this day, the boys blocked the door and said, "Daddy, don't leave." And he said, "Oh, I'll be right back. I'm just going down to Memphis. I'll be back." Then they ran ahead of him and blocked the stairs and said, "Daddy, don't leave us." And he said, "Listen, I'm coming right back. I'm just going to go down there for March. I explained why I'm going. These people have been mistreated in Memphis, and I'm going to do something about it. That's my work, and you know that." They ran over to my car, and then they jumped on the hood of the car, pleading again through the window, "Daddy, please don't go. Daddy, please don't leave us. Daddy, please." Such pleading. We backed out of the driveway and got on the way. And he said, "What in the world happened to these kids? They must be trying to tell me that they're missing me more. And when I come back, I've got to change my habits. I can't go through this."
I watched the transformation take place from the man that I met in the first instance to the man he became in the end. With all of his experience, he really was not quite ready for the human heart to reveal as much villainy What he saw was more hate than he saw resolve.
We were trying to redeem the soul of America from the triple evils of racism, war, and poverty. And Martin had become far more exposed to enemies by taking on both civil rights and the war issue.
I couldn't imagine the pressure that was on him. Nobody could. None of us could imagine that. It was just too overwhelming.
The most difficult time of his life was the 18 months before his assassination. Very difficult time.
The closes of 1968, Martin Luther King.
He was disappointed, and he wondered whether or not he could do any more than he'd done.
It had bothered him deeply that the nation had turned against him. And I always tell people he died of a broken heart.
I think he worried about dying before he had accomplished enough. It's as though that he knew that he was not going to be here for the rest of the struggle.
We've got some difficult days ahead.
The movement ceased to be political for him. It was spiritual.
But it really doesn't matter with me now.
He said, we have wandered in the wilderness of separate but equal, and we're about to move into the promised land of creative integration. And I don't know whether I'll get there, but my people will get to the promised land.
My eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
I'm 86. And you know, there's an African proverb that says if surviving lions don't tell their stories, the hunters will get all the credit.
I tell the story of Martin Luther King as I knew it. I lived it. I value all of what they gave me now that I can remember. I'm not just telling stories. I'm not making a speech. I'm telling you what happened.
So there's a lot going on there. I've seen it many times. I think it's still, Nona Clayton still sort of catches in my throat. So I'd love to hear a couple of quick reactions to what you're sort of feeling you might expect. As I said, the first 5 minutes are going to give you a preview of the scope of the feature. You know, what are you expecting from this film? What kind of, you know, storytelling and information, or how is it going to be shared? You know, what are you anticipating as a result of this, these first five minutes? Anybody willing to share some thoughts?
Yeah, I'll share my thoughts. I thought what was really a kind of interesting is we always look at the successes of a person and we don't look at the struggles to get to those successes. Like, it's almost like if you envision like an iceberg, we see the tip of the iceberg, all their success, but we don't see the defeat, the struggle that it takes to get there. And it's amazing what, you know, one man took on a burden of an entire generation of people. And, you know, not very many people are willing to sacrifice the way that he did. And ultimately he sacrificed with his life. And it was just really heartbreaking to hear, you know, the morning he left and his kids telling him, don't leave, don't go. And, he wanted to continue with the work and explained why it was so important. But then he even recognized that he might be given too much of himself here, right? And wanted to do better for his family. And I think we all experience that. So it just, we look to him sort of as, at least I do, as an elevated figure in my mind, almost like, for lack of a better term, there are people that we view as like God among men, right? He's that type of figure in my eyes, to me, and many people. But he was just a man. He was just a person. And to realize that we all have that power within ourselves to impact change, right? Nobody is insignificant on this planet. Everybody can make a difference. But knowing the sacrifice that ultimately has to be made can really take a toll, on yourself, and nobody's perfect. So this is really cool. I had not seen this film, and I'm like ready to go watch it in its entirety.
I hope you do. Thank you for everything that you just shared. I have the benefit of, having seen it multiple times, and each time I see something new, even in these few minutes. And this time, something I noticed spoke to one of your comments. They have a very quick shot of the mural in Memphis of "I Am a Man," which we are probably a little bit familiar with, and was, a statement of essentially a Black Lives Matter, slogan of that time, that Black men are men too. And yet this time I saw it as, almost as I am a man, like Martin Luther King is a man, not a myth, and in all those complex ways. And I'll also add that as I mentioned before we saw the scene, and that I think it is important that we see these people as humans, because I think then they become even that much more admirable. When we put them on this pedestal of, they become almost inhuman in a way that I'm not sure is actually helpful. Maybe one more, if anybody has something to add.
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear that, you had said the beginning of the film is going to give you the introduction. It's very clear in the beginning of this film that you're not seeing a fictionalized version of this person. This is someone who everyone in the film has met and lived with, and they're going to give you what they remember. It might not be as clear a memory as they would want it to be, but it's still much better than a fictionalized version.
Yeah, thank you. You teed up perfectly that I wanted to make particular note of these interviews, right? We're going to be hearing this story, just as you said, from the people who knew him best, who worked alongside. We ultimately get, the morning of the Lorraine Motel through Jesse Jackson's eyes, who was there. And in fact, it was the making of this film that inspired the Kunhardts to create the foundation, to create a nonprofit, because they felt and they knew that these hours of interviews that they had with these people were treasures. And they also knew as filmmakers that only a few minutes would end up in the film. And then what? And then these hours with, legends like John Lewis and C.T. Vivian, people who are passing away, would sit on a shelf somewhere. And so part of their commitment in creating the nonprofit organization was to make the interviews in their entirety available to the public. And that's also what we'll see are available on the website. So you can listen to Zernona Clayton's entire interview and get these eyewitness, very personal testimonies. And I give the Kunhardts also a tremendous amount of credit in how they shot these interviews. I think I can see on my screen, and I didn't intend this, it just happened, but along the bottom here, it has these sort of thumbnails of YouTube is telling me that I can go and watch these other interviews, but it's giving us a chance to just look at the way that these interviews are framed and lit, I mean, they are looking right at you. They are close up, they are center framed. We are not necessarily used to that. We are much more accustomed to, you know, a PBS News hour, you know, we're back here, the person's looking, or, you know, 60 Minutes, the person's looking off camera. No, this is going to be unflinching. They're talking to you, and these are also very intentional choices, and the way the music was scored, you know, these are choices that the filmmakers are making to invest us in this story. And I think that, again, it's part of the reason that, yes, it's important to acknowledge there's a level of manipulation in that, and also that it becomes a really engaging tool in the classroom, because when we're emotionally engaged, you know, our brains are going to follow, and the curiosity is going to follow. So we're going to move on to one particular sort of section and theme of the film that I just couldn't sort of not talk about after the summer we've had. And I'm going to start with some still images, and they're contemporary images. And I want to, as we go through, I won't ask for a response, but I'll share how I would talk about these images in a classroom, and recognize that it is difficult to traverse contemporary politics and social issues, and I recognize that. And I think you can do it in a way that is thoughtful and meaningful, and is not partisan, and is just asking students to think. So there's no question, if I were in a history classroom this year, if I can't teach the civil rights movement if I'm not talking about Black Lives Matter, and even in an objective, you know, way. So I would begin with some images. I'm gonna try to, again, sometimes it doesn't quite want to advance for me. Let's see. Don't want that. There we go. And I could have picked, you know, many to choose from. And I think you can share an image like this and talk about the photographer's intention. I think you can talk about what this image might mean to somebody who is fighting for the Black Lives Matter movement. I think you can talk about what this image might communicate to somebody whose father is a police officer and is concerned about the safety of police during this time. You can compare and contrast. You can ask students to take on the role of the person in the photo. These are not things in my mind to avoid. They just have to be done thoughtfully. And if I were to compare and contrast, I would talk about this image compared to this image. And I would play with how photos are chosen and framed. And I can share that this photograph was actually manipulated by me. This is a cropped version. I think the story of this image and this image are incredibly different. I think they're saying different things, and I think it's important to analyze that. The cropped version is of this original, and I find it a fascinating composition, and a lot can be, I think, talked about. And again, the point of our time together is not to go into all of this, but to really encourage you not to be too afraid to, and for the teachers in your areas to talk about these things in ways that are constructive. I think we're doing a disservice if we're not. And just in terms of sourcing, this last photo I did get from an NPR site. The link is in the slide deck that you'll get. And I just really loved it. There's a series of photographs taken with statements by the photographer. And still photos are a wonderful way to begin to get students ready to watch full films, because we really want them to be very active viewers, and as active as though they were reading a text and annotating in the columns. We want them to be watching film in the same way. And so a still image is a really powerful way to do that. So back to the film, and as I said, I think a very, very compelling and direct connection to draw is the idea and the philosophy of nonviolence. And the film does a wonderful job of talking, you know, in nuanced ways about the philosophy of nonviolence, and that nonviolence was radical, as Bernard Lafayette says. And it's obviously been a theme that we're seeing this summer, and the struggle of it. And in the film and in King's later life, Stokely Carmichael, who became head of SNCC, brought in a more, you know, violence is justified as defense argument that King really struggled to understand and embrace. And we're going to watch, let me get ahead here. I think I have a quick slide, sorry. This is a excerpt from a book. So just take a moment to read this, and then we're going to watch a quick clip from the film. So we're gonna see a quick clip that's going to show echoes of this, not from his assassination, but from the summer of 1967. As I go to cue up the next slide, I want to apologize in advance if it's not at the exact right second. It should be, but I just want to be prepared. I'll try to mute it until it's ready, and it's going to be about a 2-minute segment. So give me 1 second.
I'm not making.
I think it likes to go to the exact, it's embedded in the presentation twice. So I think it likes to cue to the same part. Okay, so we're going to be at 1:07. And you'll know the clip's beginning when we see summer 1967. So just 1 second here. Just so we're not confused. Okay, we're almost there. This is not quite the section yet. I do apologize. Okay.
This year, major Negro riots have broken out in Detroit and Newark and about 80 cities and towns all over the country. Already it's become the worst crisis in the country since the Civil War.
The despair is deep. The bitterness is wide in the ghettos of our nation. I will continue to raise my voice with all of my might against riots, because I know that Black rioting can mean black suicide.
Don't point that gun at me! Don't put that gun at me!
What must be said is that our nation's summers of riots are caused by our nation's winters of delay.
Pillage, looting, murder, and arson have nothing to do with civil rights. We will not tolerate lawlessness. You're going to sit in front of your television set and listen to LBJ tell you that violence never accomplishes anything, my fellow Americans. But you see, the real problem with violence is that we have never been violent. We have been too nonviolent.
I've decided to stick with love. And so I'm not gonna give you our motto, a preacher philosophy, burn, baby, burn. I'm gonna say, build, baby, build, organize, baby, organize.
Okay. I imagine you can see, as I do, you know, so many of the parallels and the struggle that we're going through right now. And I think, again, particularly with older, you know, with high school students, there's a real opportunity to have a really meaningful discussion about the philosophy of nonviolence, the struggle of it in reality. And I do wonder if having that conversation based on a clip like this that's rooted in history, if we can do that first, like what would it look like if we were to analyze and discuss, you know, that section of the film and then talk about today, what new insight might we have? And so I leave that one as an open question. I don't have the answers. I'm not in a classroom in the summer of 2020 or the fall of 2020, but I do challenge all of us to be asking those questions about the conversations that we're willing to have and how we're going to teach history this year. So I want to move, it feels a little bit abrupt, but I do want to show you a bit of some of the resources that are connected to another film by the Kunhardts. It's True Justice, the one I mentioned earlier, that came out in the...
You muted yourself, Emily.
I'm sorry. I find that I'm not advancing the slides in a predictable way. I'm so sorry.
Oh, no worries. It's technology. 2020 summed up in a, right?
Hashtag because 2020.
That's right.
We've all become very patient with our technology. So.
Thank you, thank you. Could not have a more empathetic audience, I imagine. So my segue to Brian Stevenson, to this man, is that he was described to me as a combination of Martin Luther King and Thurgood Marshall living in our time. The spirituality of Martin Luther King and the intellect of Thurgood Marshall, and it just stayed with me because it rings really true. And he is truly a civil rights icon that is living amongst us and is living today, and is not of the past, is of this moment, and yet is asking all of us to engage in a conversation about history that is going to be telling the truth. Brian is a civil rights attorney in Montgomery, Alabama. He's dedicated his life to trying to eradicate inequality and racial prejudice in the criminal justice system. I really would love to show, and I think we can do it. We're going to watch the first 5 minutes of this film as well, so that you can get a small preview of what True Justice is all about. Oops.
We'll hear argument next today in case 17-7505, Madison versus Alabama. Mr. Stevenson.
Mr. Chief Justice, may it please the court. It's undisputed that Vernon Madison now sits on Alabama's death row, unable to fully orient to time and place. The authority to execute someone who is not an immediate threat is an awesome power. And that power has to be utilized fairly, reliably, and humanely. For most of my career, I provided legal representation to people on death row. I've argued a bunch of cases before the United States Supreme Court, and each time I go, I stand there in front of the court. I read what it says about equal justice under law. All right, thank you all very much. I have to believe that to make sense out of what I do. I've been thinking a lot recently about an incident that took place when I was a little boy. My mom saved up enough money for my sister and I to get on a church bus trip to the new Disney World that had just opened up. I remember being so excited about it because not only were we going to go to Disney World, we would be staying in a hotel, and the hotel would have a swimming pool. My sister and I had never been in a real swimming pool. As we pulled into the hotel, my sister started squealing. As soon as the bus stopped, she grabbed me and we went streaking over to this pool. I grabbed her hand and we jumped high in the air and we landed in that pool, and it was as glorious as I had imagined it would be. It was just unbelievable. And we were having such fun. And then I realized that chaos had broken out around us. White parents were frantically running into the water, snatching their children violently out of the pool. And I was looking at my sister, trying to figure out what is going on. Finally, there was one little boy left in the pool. And this big guy came, he snatched him by the arm and lifted him out of the water. And the little boy started crying hysterically. I turned to that white man and I said, "What's wrong?" And he gave me this look and he said, "You're wrong, nigger." We got out of the pool and I ran to my mom. And when I told her what the man said, she looked at me and she said, "You get back in that pool." She said, "Don't you let those people run you from that pool." What I remember most vividly from that trip is getting back in the pool and standing in the corner of the pool, holding my sister's hand and desperately trying not to cry. What do you do with a memory like that? I still remember that. And the question becomes, do the white kids remember the day they were forced out of the pool by their parents because two black kids got into the water? Memory is powerful. It's a powerful force in the way a society evolves. We have a constitution that talks about equality, liberty, and justice for all. And for decades, for centuries, we tolerated enslavement of other human beings. We tolerated abuse and violence against people. We tolerated bigotry and discrimination. And in thinking about what it would take to move this court and this country to a place of greater resolve when it comes to eliminating bias and discrimination, it became clear to me that we haven't really talked much about the legacy of racial bias. I think there's a kind of smog in the air that's created by the history of slavery and lynching and segregation. And I don't think we're going to get healthy. I don't think we can be free until we address this problem. But to get there, we're going to have to be willing to tell the truth.
So again, in our bit of preview, what we're going to find in this film is that same very interweaving of a very personal, intimate story of Brian's life and what made him the man he is. And we're going to get a kind of truth. We're going to get an historical narrative that we may not have learned, that we may not see the significance of today. And the film is going to interweave those two things, the historical narrative, the personal story, with some very significant court cases and legislation that he has made possible. It's a really, really beautiful, moving film. And in addition to the feature-length version, there is an educator version. So I'd like to, as I said, come out of the slideshow and go into the Kunhardt Film Foundation website so that you can see where some of these materials live, what else is here. I'm going to start us right here on the KunhardtFilmFoundation.org site. In case I don't have time at the end, this beautiful face staring at us, who we lost this summer, there's a 10-minute film. I'll just click here quickly. If you click on his picture, you'll see John Lewis's Last March. This is a 9-minute film that is perfect for classroom use. The Kunhardts went down to Selma in March of this year and filmed him on his last march across Edmund Pettus Bridge. And this tribute is really, really, really gorgeous. I was very tempted to use it today, but there were too many other things. So please know that's there. But in terms of teaching true justice, as an example, and here are all the films that will have resources attached to them. If I go to educator resources and I click on true justice, there are 6 lesson plans. There's a discussion guide for the entire film, and this is where all the interviews live. And so that's the same for the King in the Wilderness as well. You can go to educator resources and then find all those feature-length interviews. Inside the lessons, I'm going to go to lesson 5 because that includes the clip we just saw. And this one's called lesson 5 is the power of memory. And each of these lesson plans has, all these elements that you can see here, essential questions, handouts, assessment, standards alignment. It's incredibly rich. We work with a really talented team of women who are based in Denver called Blue Shift Education. And they both come from, history teaching backgrounds. They do a really wonderful job. So these include the clips. That clip we just watched is this power of memory. And I invite you, if you have a moment, to spend some time looking through here. These just collapse. I just want you to have, this is a brief orientation so you know what's here. The same kind of resources exist for King in the Wilderness. There are 6 lesson plans. One focuses on women in the movement, which I think is a very untold story. There's a whole lesson on the philosophy of nonviolence. Martin Luther King as the man, the sort of, more private life. And all of that is here. And then I mentioned the interview archive. Those are here. And then the photo archive. The photos are integrated into the lesson plans, and they're also here as high resolution downloadable images that are all public domain and available to you to use with full captions. There's so much here, and there's more to come. So my last slide is to show you what's coming. Here's the John Lewis film, and then I'm going to allow a couple minutes for questions. I feel we've been a little bit rushed towards the end here. That's often the case, unfortunately. But here's what's coming. October 27th, mark your calendars, will be the HBO premiere of the Kunhardt's newest film. The Soul of America is based on the best-selling book by Pulitzer Prize winning author and historian John Meacham. He has been on the airwaves quite a bit these past few years. The film is like a teacher's dream. It covers there's four case studies of American history that provide sort of a corollary or a reflection to things going on today. The four case studies are women's suffrage, FDR and Japanese incarceration, McCarthy, and civil rights. And I am so excited for it to come out. We are putting the finishing touches right now on all the lesson plans and the viewing guide. And it's really rich and a really, again, sort of some similarities to what we did in this session of how do we talk about our current moment with a historical perspective. What do we learn? What can we arm ourselves with? And before thank you, there's my email address. I'm happy to take a couple minutes for questions. Again, I'm so grateful to Greg and to the conference organizers to have a chance to talk with all of you, because so much of this is new. We're trying to share what we have, make it better, hear from you about what more might be useful, how can we work with your district. I'm happy to, provide, be in touch with your, your colleagues, your schools, your building leaders, anything around further professional development, screenings. Very important that I note that the feature-length versions of King in the Wilderness and True Justice are available on the KFF site. If you want the 52-minute cut-down version of True Justice, I have that via Vimeo, and you would just need to send me an email to request it. And here I am talking in the question portion. Is there anything that I can, any questions I can answer?
I mean, I'll just say thank you again, Emily. Emily really is a good thought partner, a great thought partner, actually, and has a passion for this work. And I think if you all take the time to go and look at those resources, we all come from across New York State. So we service different pockets of people, and capacity sometimes looks very different to engage in this work and engage in these conversations. But there's such a rich kind of breadth of materials. And the power of hearing from Brian or hearing from some of, those partners of Dr. King's, the one thing that we can't deny is how people feel and how they process and see things. And so in a time where it's really hard, I think, for students to cut through, secondhand narratives and, we talk about media literacy and just literacy in general. There's a power in just being able to watch a film, and how many of these things are really turnnkeyed and readied to be used in a virtual space, whether you use Randy and Diane's design or whether you use your own. So just something to kind of keep in mind. But, I've spent hours in there and gone through a lot of it, and a lot of it's kind of centered some of the work that we've done here. But thanks again, Emily. Really appreciate you taking the time.
My absolute pleasure. What's on tap for this afternoon?
So we are coming up on a break, and I don't want to cut anyone off just in case anyone does have questions. But we are coming up on a break, and then coming up next in this room, Jessica is going to be taking over hosting responsibilities, and we're going to be with Generation Citizen, which also has a lot to do with this work. That was mentioned in our keynote address this morning as well, but Generation Citizen, a terrific organization that focuses in on action civics. And then in the other room, there's going to be Level Up Village, which does cross-continent work where it connects kids with other kids in Kenya. So it's just lots of really different, unique experiences. But you're more than welcome to hang around, Emily. But we're going to be going on a break momentarily if there aren't any questions.
And I'm quickly scanning through the chat, so thank you to everybody who shared thoughts there. I really appreciate it.
Emily, I just have one really quick question. I have not been to the foundation site before. I'm so in love already, and I just can't wait to dive in. Are these materials mainly just for high school? We're talking juniors, seniors, or can they be brought down to our middle school?
That's a great question. So, and yes, so these films are also available on HBO if you happen to be a subscriber. They're all streaming there. And I would say for both films, 9 through 12 for sure. I would say for you know, I think there are pieces and excerpts that can be used in middle school. I don't know that I would show the films in their entirety to middle school. That being said, I have twins in 8th grade who had watched the 52-minute version of True Justice with me over the summer. And they were absolutely there and capable. So, you know your students best. I know you would watch it in advance. I would absolutely stay open to middle school for some of these projects, and particularly Soul of America. I think elementary, probably less so, other than, you know, excerpts of the interview archive and the photos. That's my sense. I will also say I have not taught elementary or primary, so that's an important thing to note in terms of my context.
Thanks.
And please don't hesitate. I'd love to hear from you. You know, email me. If you try something, let me know how it went. If if it went well, if you struggled, if you want another check-in before you try something, I'm really accessible. And it would be exciting to think about, some more film screening opportunities as these new projects come out in 2021.
All right. Well, thank you again, Emily. And thank you again for giving your time and sharing all these valuable resources with us. So folks, we're going to take about a 15-minute break, give or take. And again, if you're planning on staying for Generation Citizen, you can certainly hang out in this room. If you're going to transition over to the other room, just reference the sheet that Pat had sent out, which has the full schedule on it. But thanks again, Emily, and stay well, and I will certainly talk to you soon.
You guys too. Take care.
All right, be well.
Doing the good work.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.